Welcome to the Mill and Mine. We always like to have our gatherings in historic places. This building is not quite as old as the Foundry where we've met in all our previous luncheons, but I would submit that this building is historic too. It got its modern name rather whimsically by pairing some words on the modern sign for its last tenant, which was Industrial Belting and Supply, which doesn't sound like the name of a nightclub. But it was built in the 1920s to be the Mack International Motor Truck Corporation's showroom. This was Mack's regional headquarters for a four-state area. Today we think of Mack trucks as big tractor-trailer rigs, but in the 1920s, most of their products were smaller than some modern pickup trucks. They were made for heavy-duty industrial work, but they're also nimble and stylish enough to drive on city streets. It's not unlikely that several major projects in the area, like the Henley Street Bridge, McGee-Tyson Airport, both locations, and Holston Hills Golf Course, were built using trucks purchased in this room. The same block also had a Rent-A-Ford dealership, obviously intended to appeal to passengers just off Southern Railway who needed to go somewhere within the city. And this area seems to have been designated for motorized transportation. Depot Street and part of North Gay were sort of Knoxville's first motor mile, with almost a dozen different car dealerships, each with its own showroom. Before that, the street was part of what we knew was in the 1870s and 80s as Irish Town, which was our most robust immigrant neighborhood. Down on the corner of this side was Kavanaugh's Saloon, which had a boxing ring upstairs. The building is still there and still has a bar. It's called the Monkey Bar. But across the street from there was Bill Long's place, which was an Irish bar, opened in the saloon era, and maybe only Knoxville's only bar to survive Prohibition intact. It's amazing to imagine how they did that. And they thrived on the corner of Central and Depot until it was torn down for parking in 1976. Maybe you parked there today. In the early 1900s, Depot Street was one of Knoxville's busiest neighborhoods, with several hotels, large and small, most of them serving the 24-hour passenger train business in the vicinity of the Southern Railway. This is one of the areas, when you see old pictures, it's one of the least recognizable areas because it looks like somewhere in New York. There's just so much going on, big buildings all around. Of course, history doesn't stop. Many people know this building today as the site of the popular and constantly changing Pacha series. Paul and I have both been on this stage separately presenting high-speed slideshows about KHP programs, and the originator of that, Matthew DeBartoleben, is here today. But it's included in our new music guide because it has been one of the main venues for the Big Ears Festival and has hosted Chris Thiele, Kamasi Washington, Patti Smith, Bill Frisell, and Insane Clown Posse. My daughter had to clean up after that one. We learned in our United Way research that this room was once the site of an exclusive unpublicized concert by Lyle Lovett in 2016. A couple of years ago, it hosted what was probably poet Nikki Giovanni's last public appearance in her hometown. Now right about 100 years old. And in speaking of anniversaries and preparing for today's talk, I realized something that I should have thought about before, because we should have had an event just about it. This is roughly our 10th anniversary as a nonprofit. 10 years ago today, after about 5 months of study and argument involving at least 2 lawyers, 2 veteran publishers, a history professor, a couple of librarians, and our first treasurer, Mary Linda Schwartzbart, who's in the room, we had completed and filed one of the IRS's most formidable forms, the 1023, which was our request to be legally recognized as a 501c3 nonprofit. That form was especially difficult because it described our role in launching a newspaper called the Knoxville Mercury. Our model was said to be unprecedented, and there may have been reasons for that. But it was grueling, tedious work. I had rarely ever seen a budget spreadsheet in my life, much less filled one out myself. I had rarely read anybody's bylaws and didn't know that the precise wording of such things was ever considered important to anybody. But fortunately, several members of our dream team of a board of directors knew a lot about these things, even if several of them disagreed about how to proceed. We were told it might be a year before we heard back from the IRS, and that our plan was so unusual it might be rejected. But on September 2nd, about 4 months after we filed it, we received a letter that it all worked, and we were indeed a 501c3 educational nonprofit. I attribute that success largely to the caliber of people who believed in the project enough to sign their names to it, including the late Bob Booker, one of our previous luncheon honorees. Our nonprofit newspaper, The Mercury, lasted only 2.5 years. It's very expensive to run a newspaper and staff, even a very small one. But when we finally ran out of money, I did some calculating and determined that no newspaper in Knoxville history has ever won so many journalism awards per staffer than the Mercury did. I'm glad we did it, but we'll always wonder what we could have done to make it work. Since then, KHP has been purely an educational nonprofit, publishing no newspapers, but lots of books, booklets. We're giving talks, slideshows, tours, creating public art projects, podcasts, and have created a very impressive website with a public photo archive and other resources. I can't take credit for anything on the website except the written stuff. But I'm grateful and surprised at what we've been able to do with it. We've used our stories to help Knoxvillians understand where they came from, but also we've introduced the city to newcomers. To this day, the most thorough guide to the city of Knoxville is our book, Knoxville, The Curious Visitor's Guide, which came out about 6 years ago and has sold several thousand copies. We hope to raise money to come out with a new edition soon. Meanwhile, we're also working on many other projects in various media, as Paul has mentioned, all of which may play a role in raising Knoxville's profile in the world of cities. This week, popular national history author Rick Atkinson gave a fascinating talk for an East Tennessee Historical Society event at First Presbyterian Church, mostly about the Revolutionary War, but he offered an aside about Knoxville. He said, "I've been in hundreds of cities and towns across America, but none more interesting than this one." We agree, but it's perplexing that many Americans seem to have no purchase on the concept of Knoxville, or that's often left out of places where it seems to belong. Perhaps because it doesn't yet have a purchase on the American imagination. We hope to change that. These are anxious times for public history and for any cultural nonprofit. Although we fantasized about federal funding, we've never received any. So we're not in immediate peril from current cutbacks in Washington. Almost all of our funding is local. We exist mainly thanks to the people in this room. However, because several of our local partners and clients are suffering, we'll feel the pinch more acutely in months and years to come, too. I'm grateful to our donors and for the prudent management on the part of our treasurers, our board, and our colleagues, my colleagues, Paul and Nicole, for keeping us in the black, as unlikely as that has once seemed. I have to admit that until recently, I probably could not have defined the term DEI, but I want to state for the record that you can't have any kind of history that's fair or honest, or frankly very interesting, without diversity and inclusion. Those aspects are part of our essential mission, and deliberate attempts to include whole categories of people previously neglected in our history have proven to be one of the most exciting aspects of history in the 21st century. You've heard that the Bijou Theater is planning to restore its second balcony, once referred to as the Colored Gallery. Our oldest theater has never been the subject of a comprehensive book-length history, but to promote this project and to better understand its significance, the board chose to work with us in the Beck Center to publish a book just about the Black experience at the Bijou, including the long period that it was a racially segregated theater. I was at first skeptical of our role in the project. There had been a couple of respected scholarly narratives of the theater published over the last 50 years, and after reading them, I assumed that Black history of the Bijou would be anecdotal and disjointed. But with the help of resources at the Beck Center and diligent research by interns and our colleague Paul Brown, and tips from our old friend Bob Booker, plus many hours of newspaper research, we found dozens of surprises that prove that black people have been elementally important to the Bijou almost daily since the beginning. We bet you'll be surprised. The untold, long-ignored stories are often the most interesting ones. And I want to say right now that I'm very proud of our music guide, but there's some things about it that make me cringe, and one is the things that I chose to set aside or treat differently. And and I've mentioned this to a couple of different groups, is that R.B. Morris is not one of the people we highlighted as one of the people who changed music history in the book. But he's a better musician than a lot of the people that we did highlight in there, and I think he's in the room, so I wanted to mention that. R.B. We do mention him a few times in other parts of the booklet, but American music forces diversity on us whether we're ready for it or not. Even country music has exotic roots, as we describe with Roy Acuff's introduction of the dobro, which in 1935 was considered a Hawaiian sound, as in fact it was. Diversity matters even as a subject as old-fashioned and elemental to American summers as ice cream. As part of a project for Visit Knoxville, I'm currently looking into the early history of ice cream in Knoxville. Ice cream seems, that's one of our more fun projects. Ice cream seems as American and nostalgic as baseball. But my newspaper research strongly suggests that it was popularized on Knoxville streets in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s, mainly by immigrants who were just learning English. Among the first was Signor Giovanni Riccardi, who came here with his brother Pietro from Italy. A later family from Sicily perfected the process. You can see the name Armetta beside the words ice cream painted on a wall on Jackson Avenue to this day. This is a 100-year-old sign. Then there was Leon Chevans, a French-speaking immigrant from Switzerland who competed with the Riccardi brothers with his place on Cumberland Avenue during the Civil War period. Peter Kern, a German-speaking refugee from violent political unrest in Hesse-Darmstadt, opened his famous ice cream saloon on Market Square in 1865. The Spiro brothers, Jewish refugees from the Austrian Empire, were here by 1869 with an ice cream parlor on Gay Street, on the same block where Cruz and Phoenix Pharmacy ice cream parlors are today. There were two notable exceptions, two native-born English-speaking pioneers in bringing ice cream to Knoxville. Two men who were known in the era of slavery as free people of color. First, a black man known to us only as Rawson, around 1850. Then Alfred Anderson, who sold ice cream on Main Street before he became pastor of the powerful Logan Temple AME Zion Church and became a political figure himself. Of course, it was understood that to make great ice cream, you need a marble slab. That's the subject of the day. Across the street from this building is the old Southern Railway Station, now 122 years old, but not the first station there. Those who read our newsletter know that this week marks the 170th anniversary of the arrival of railroads in Knoxville. I could make the case that the event in 1855 was at least as notable in Knoxville history as anything in 1791. The old frontier capital was essentially reborn as an industrial center and a culturally much livelier place than it had ever been before. Most of the Knoxville we know came after that. This neighborhood became the most diverse part of Knox County. Everything was about the railroad, from the hotels, especially the huge posh Atkin Hotel, to all the cheap hotels and boarding houses, barbershops, bars, and 24-hour cafes around here 100 years ago. Black and white people lived on this same street. If you were here at the right time, you might see Buffalo Bill or Tallulah Bankhead or President Taft, who spoke at another luncheon just down the sidewalk in 1911. And it was all near the home of the extremely eccentric attorney John R. Neal, champion of lost causes, including the one remembered this summer, that of the teacher John Scopes. We're remembering the Scopes monkey trial next month, the centennial of it, down in Dayton. He lived at the Hotel Watauga for many decades by himself, and there are reasons that he lived by himself. But we're going to be, I gave a talk about him. We're going to be having a story about him published in our website pretty soon. This is also the point in which we shipped marble to all corners of the nation, reaching new heights in the 1870s and earning the nickname the Marble City. Marble is reflected all over town, including the design of the Southern Station, soon to be central to UT's architectural program. If you've ever been inside it, you know that there are marble tablets inside that are carved with some of the rather obscure poetry of Robert Burns. Today we're honoring Susan Knowles, who has learned more about marble than anyone I know. She's our first honoree who doesn't live in Knoxville full-time, though she's such a familiar figure that many people think she does, and many of you know her. I got to work with her recently on the Knoxville Museum of Art's Higher Ground catalog. They call it a catalog, but it's really a richly illustrated history of art in Knoxville from several different perspectives. Hers was about the role of marble in our art and architecture.